Hi, how are you? My name's Keith Karlo, and I get the pleasure of working with this crew over here. Glenn and I met a few years ago in our training, and he brought me on about 6 months ago, and I was pretty fortunate to have that happen. When I was talking earlier, it was a little bit bigger group, but I mentioned if I was sitting where you're sitting, I would say, what could this 58-year-old old, she said she was old, I make her look like I have socks older than her, and what could we possibly have in common? And the answer to that is that I sat where you're sitting when I was your age, and I was already drinking about 2 or 3 days a week. I started in middle school. And I had a guy like me standing up in front of a room saying, listen, this is how this ends. And that guy had been in a whole bunch of bad situations, spent a little time in prison. And I said, sure, maybe for you, but it can't go that badly for me. That just won't work out that way. I'm smarter than that. I can stop anytime I want, every excuse there was to have. And so I continued on like that. And through high school, I was drinking regularly. For somehow or another, we got away with Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. It was drinking and smoking weed, and it was always to excess. I did not honestly start out when I was 13, 14 years old thinking that I would become an alcoholic. It wasn't anything I ever dreamed that I hoped would happen. It just slowly but surely progressed, and it happened. And it crept up on me a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. I got married and had children, and I still had this nagging problem going on. I had this relatively normal life. And then I had this whole other thing where I would just do anything I could to not deal with what was going on up here. I didn't like what was going on in my head most of the time. It was always, I call it a pretty big old crap storm blowing up there. That's how it feels for me. And it quieted down when, much like Glenn, I was introduced to opiates. And I took them the same way I drank, in excess, every single time. And there was a slow, steady progression of that. And all the while along, when I was sitting where it was your age, it can't happen to me, and now I'm knee-deep in it, and I can't figure a way out of it. I can even remember sitting in a hospital one time. It just came to me when Jamie was speaking. I was in a hospital one time, and I looked at a nurse, and I said, I'm pretty sure I have a problem with these pills. Can you help me? She said, call your doctor on Tuesday. I'm sure he'll work it out. Things have changed. Thank God things have changed. There was no team like us where the nurse would then say, hey, we need to call those guys. There was nobody at that time, as recently as like 2013, for me to have a conversation with. So life just went on that way, and I grew distant, and I was married, but it wasn't good. And there was a wipeout around the corner that I couldn't have even imagined. So December 23rd of 2015, I got arrested for 3 aggravated robberies with a weapon. I was looking at 42 years in prison. So when you're creeping up on 50, that's a long time. I'm not trying to throw the big old scared straight speech at you, but I was the guy. It couldn't happen to me. I was smarter. I was slicker. I would figure it out. And I was so deep in the throes of addiction that I could not figure anything out. I couldn't hold a job. The first 23 years of my working career, I had 2 jobs. The last 7 years before I got arrested, I had 9 jobs. And that's how I flushed my life down the toilet. So face down on the pavement with knees in my back and the cuffs getting put on was when I had that awakening Glenn was talking about. I knew something had to change. And it's kind of funny because as much as I was disgusted by the situation that I was in and the worst that I put my family in, two teenage boys, one in college, one in high school, My kids, I had one 16, same age as you guys, and one in college. And that poor kid had to walk back into his high school with his friends after I had been on 2 news stations and the front page of the paper in the Akron area. So I humiliated everybody. And that was awful. But it was also out there what a problem I had. And all of a sudden, some opportunity to do something about it showed up. Now, don't get me wrong. Prison was around the corner. That was going to happen. There was no way that wasn't going to happen. I was going to prison. I went and spent 60 days in a treatment facility, and I went in and I went to the sentencing hearing. I couldn't believe my ears when they only gave me 6 years. It was a miracle that they only gave me 6 years. I got just absolutely blessed. And very much like Glenn and Jamie have said, I think God's on my side on this thing. I don't get too far down that rabbit hole because I'm not sure you want to hear any more of that from a 58-year-old. But I believe in that, and I believe in that spirituality that will save me a little bit at a time. So I went to prison, and I met a nice lady there that saw me trying to change my life, and she introduced me to peer support. And that's kind of how I got down this direction. I got home, and 6 months later, I went to some classes, and Glenn and I met. While I was in prison, though, there was programs in there for guys that were trying to better their lives. And there was this barbershop program, and I was kind of friends with this guy, and he said, hey, I notice you shave every day. And I was like, yeah, I'm old. I'll shave every day. That's what we do. And he said, would you mind coming down to the barbershop and sitting in a chair while a straight razor shave of all things, while I practice for my barbershop license? I said, yeah, no problem. And in talking to this guy, I got to know him a little bit. His name's J.R. Luck. Believe it or not. Last name's Luck. And JR would give me these straight razor shaves, and he would talk about how he couldn't get past his addiction. He was in prison. He was getting high darn near every day because it's not too tough to get high in prison. It's everywhere. And we would have these conversations, and he would say, man, if I just do this and if I just do that. And I said, you need to connect with some spirituality. We can keep talking about this. And I would go to AA meetings in prison with this guy, and he was a good dude. He was trying. He didn't want to keep getting high. And he was getting out. And I said, are you going to be okay? He said, yeah, I think once I'm not around the drugs all the time, I'll be good. And on his first trip, shooting up, he overdosed and died. So JR is on my mind every single day of the week when I shave. I can think about JR, and I wonder often, why did God spare me and not JR? The only thing I can kind of come up with is that the people that tried to help me, I jumped out there and took the help as much as I could get it and did everything I could to do it. But I'm here to tell you that the guy who sat where you're sitting that said it can't happen to me went to prison for 4.5 years of the 6 that they gave me. And I'm the lucky one. Because JR didn't make it. And I sure as heck don't want that to happen to any of you. So if you're struggling with it, talk to somebody. And people will respond. Don't be afraid to go to somebody and say, hey, this is what's going on. Talk to your officer. He knows how to get a hold of us. We'll be here. It won't be like my experience in the hospital where somebody said, talk to somebody in 3 days. We're on it. And we're more than happy to help. Because I certainly don't want any of you to wind up where I wound up. And even more so, I don't want you to wind up like JR. So, thanks.